Hello there, divine, beautiful humans. So, yesterday I had finally the experience of watching the movie Sound of Freedom here in Scotland. And I've been wanting to see this movie since it came out back in July in Canada, but alas, the timing didn't really sync up until now. And this is a bit of a spiritual review of the film and why I think everyone really needs to see this beautiful, harrowing, tragic, and yet hopeful piece of cinema. So, if you don't know, Sound of Freedom is a movie starring Jim Caviezel. He played Jesus in Mel Gibson's movie The Passion of Christ. And it's actually a true story. It's based on the true story of Tim Ballard, who used to work for the American government, I believe the Department of Defense, in their human trafficking unit. And then he eventually went rogue and created his own private unit to take care of human and child trafficking, specifically because he found that there was a lot of hangups within the government. So this is a story really about him at that moment of going rogue when he attempts and successfully rescues two Honduran children from a child trafficking ring that takes him into many places in Central America. This film was completed 5 years ago, and there have been substantial roadblocks for its release into the world. And a lot of this is because, as the world is waking up to, there is a horrible network of global human and child trafficking rings all over the world that also implicate some very powerful people. I think a lot of people that we'd be shocked to know are connected. And human trafficking is one of the most profitable and widespread forms of trafficking in the world. There are more people in slavery now on planet Earth than there has ever been at any point, even when slavery was legal in many places. That in itself is a massive thing to absorb. And I really feel that this movie is one of those pivotal movies. And there's been many movies, a few in a generation, that shine a light through the power of storytelling on a particular issue that a lot of us may be unaware of. And Sound of Freedom is one of those movies. This is such a big and heartbreaking problem. And the movie does an incredibly intense yet wonderful job of rendering the horrors of child trafficking. There were points at the beginning of the movie, in particular, when we first are introduced to Tim, the character that Jim Caviezel plays, and you start to witness some of the horrors that these children go through when they are sold and captured into child sex trafficking. You know, some of them are raped dozens and dozens of times a day. And a lot of it is captured on video, and then those videos are sold on the dark web as child porn. And there were moments at the beginning of the movie where I literally almost felt like I couldn't take it anymore. Like I wanted to almost leave. I was almost feeling sick to my stomach, just empathically feeling what those children must go through, and of course, what they must go through for the rest of their lives. Because to be so violated at such a young age, when you are so sensitive and so absorbing, so open-hearted, is a massive, massive horror for any human being to go through. Even speaking about it right now, I feel like tears welling up in my eyes. My heart is really cringing. It's truly unimaginable, and yet this is something that millions and millions of children are going through every day. It's estimated upwards to 50 million people are in forced labor or sex trafficking at this very moment, and 35% of them are children. this is the most common type of trafficking actually in the US, which is in itself a really horrifying figure. And this notion of human and child trafficking, unfortunately, is an issue that has been blocked from being promulgated, from being announced, shared with the public. The media doesn't like to cover these things all that much. And when you really weigh that against what the media does cover, these nonsense wars, for example, all kinds of other distractive elements, you wonder why. Why is this stuff not only not shared more often, and why is there not a huge global effort? Because, war in itself is horrible, but this notion of child and human sex trafficking in general, which is literally modern day slavery, to me is one of the greatest issues on our planet, and why there isn't a global, international, massive effort where this should be like one of the main priorities in the world. Because when human beings go through this is some of the most grave suffering that a human being can go through, and it can have ramifications for the rest of their life, for their families, for their generations after that. And this is where it gets very murky, actually, because when you witness how human and child trafficking is being blockaded, and when I speak of blockaded, one example that I'd like to use is there was a PBS documentary, I believe in the 90s, that was censored. It's called Conspiracy of Silence. You can actually watch it if you type in Conspiracy of Silence. And this was a investigative journalistic piece that was investigating a child trafficking ring that was discovered, I believe, in Arizona, in America. And what was discovered was that it implicated people all the way up into the highest positions of the White House, and thus it was shut down. There was literally journalists who were killed in this investigation. And just before the documentary was to air, the night before, the network received incredible pressure from very powerful people within the government, and it was never aired, and all the tapes were destroyed. The only reason we have a very raw edit of it is some courageous soul at the studio managed to smuggle out like one of the last edits of the documentary. So you can find it. It's very harrowing. It's a big smoking gun. And of course we have the whole Epstein thing, which implicates, British royal family, world leaders from around the world, celebrities, you name it. And then of course Ghislaine Maxwell, who was a co-conspirator with him. And perhaps one of the most disappointing yet understandable things that's going on right now is this movie, Sound of Freedom, which is, in my mind, the first movie that has really blown the whistle to show this issue in a very poignant film, a very well directed, well put together, incredibly acted film. The children who play the characters of the victims, their acting is just incredible, and Jim Caviezel is incredible, and it really just perpetual tug at your heartstrings. By the end of the movie, you really feel like you've been through an emotional workout, and it's a good thing because it's strengthening your empathy and your awareness of something that a lot of us don't want to look at. But we have to remember, when it comes to even microcosmic shadow work, we need to look at the things that make us uncomfortable. Awareness is the first ignition of catalyzing some kind of transformation. And that's why I'm so pleased that this movie has, just mostly through word of mouth and this ingenious pay it forward campaign that they put together, where you can literally donate and buy tickets for others to see this film. This film has outperformed the latest Mission Impossible movie by Tom Cruise, the new Indiana Jones with Harrison Ford. It is done amazing at the box office. I believe it's exceeded $200 million, if not more. And it was made on a shoestring budget compared to most Hollywood movies of about 16 million. And it's incredible that it's being shared so much and has gained such momentum, because I think people know that this story needs to be told. It needs to be amplified. This is how real change starts, by people just becoming aware foremost of the issue. So I really, really hope you go and see the movie. But, when you look at the child and sex trafficking rings and why it's such a problem, is because, and this is something that I'm writing in this spiritual novel I'm working on called Earth Night. There's scenes where the main character Arthur goes through visionary experiences with plant medicines and with meditation with his teacher Merlin. And he's shown this kind of control system that these dark, shadowy figures, entities themselves, the demonic, and also human beings in collaboration, who create this network of disempowerment on the planet to keep human beings more easily controlled. And the easiest way to disempower human beings is to mess and distort with their sexuality. Your sexuality is connected to your sacral chakra in the system of Vedic philosophy that brings forth the wisdom of yoga. And the sacral chakra is called Swadhisthana, which is a Sanskrit word which translates as in one's own dwelling. And it really means being at home in your body. This is why sexuality is so important. And we are going through such a huge awareness of having a healthier form of sexuality, whether it's shining a light on the depravities of pedophilia, child abuse, child sex crimes, and then, of course, with the Me Too campaign, rape and sexual abuse against women. But men are also coming forward and describing, their harrowing addictions to pornography and wanting to liberate themselves from a culture that is so suffuse with a very lascivious or lustful form of sexuality that is very carnal. Whereas we can find in ancient writings a more sacred form of sexuality, a more tantric form of sexuality, which is really about love, honoring, reverence, and using these sexual forces in a skillful way to actually heal our bodies, our souls, and to create really strong bonds of partnership between the men and women, or whatever sexual proclivity you have. And this is going to become more and more relevant as we go further into this awakening process. This is something that I bring in a lot of my work with my books, Love's Revolution, and I teach, my online course, Sacred Sexual Bliss. And I really have this dream of one day developing a sacred sexuality course for young people so that they can start from the beginning, knowing a more beautiful and divine way to work with this force of lovemaking and their sexuality, so they don't have to go through what many of us have gone through, which is this harrowing sort of dark night of the soul, through addiction, through abuse, through just misuse, and a lot of heartbreak and pain, by using our sexuality and our force of really loving, because that's what sexuality is in its most healthy form. It's love making. It's where love is made and emboldened. And this system that we have on our hands in the world, where millions and millions and millions of people are being sexually trafficked and abused, it creates huge ramifications in our collective species, especially when the wound is not discussed and there's no light shined on it. So it becomes very repressed. And of course, we see this with the scandals with the Catholic Church, the sex abuse there. There's a lot of very powerful people who do not want this information out, because this is one of the ways that the depravity of certain elites, this is their enjoyment, but it's also one of the ways on a demonic level that human beings are kept stunted and stultified in their true potential to evolve and be more divine beings, which is a huge part of the era that we're living in right now. As we enter into this more Aquarian age, it really is about humanity coming into its divinity, coming into our sacred embodiment and power. And this huge control network that distorts our sexuality, that distorts our connection with our holy flesh, with the body, with our very soul, is one of the ways that we are being kept down And so these child and human trafficking networks that have to do with sex crimes, these things need to be addressed and they need to be taken care of, because this is holding us back collectively. It's wounding us. And the amount of suffering that people are going through these terrible, terrible, terrible experiences are really, really hard to heal. And we really need to take this on. We really need to shine a light on this. The film itself is absolutely amazing. It's a very well-paced, kind of thrilling action slash drama with incredible acting, and it takes you through a really beautiful, heroic journey, and it really breaks your heart open to this issue. And of course, many of us will probably see this movie and feel quite helpless afterwards. But truly, it's about talking about it more. This is a very hard thing to process, especially when we think about how many of the influential, powerful people in the world could be implicated in this. But it starts with us coming into an awareness and then taking it on in our lives. So start building a culture of sacred sexuality where there can be healing provided, even to those who are so distorted, who are in so much distortion around their sexuality. I truly believe there's ways to heal all of our wounds if we work with the divine and we work with all these ancient wisdoms and new wisdoms that are all coming together to help us take on this incredible healing. So please go and see the movie. It's absolutely incredible. I'm going to link the trailer down below, as well as one of the most moving songs from the film called Sound of Freedom by Justin Jesso. I've been listening to it this morning. It's absolutely beautiful song and really encapsulate the poignancy of this film. So please go and see it and take time afterwards to really, process what you've seen if you go with friends or family. And I encourage you to share as well online how this movie makes you feel and your thoughts on these and your feelings on these harrowing matters. In the end, this is about feeling hope. This is a very good sign that this movie has come out. We've waited a long time for, these kinds of stories, these kinds of films to, really come out. And, the last thing I want to share is, the media, the mainstream media is really freaking out about this film. And I think this is a really touchy and difficult subject, but it needs to be discussed because a lot of this is being politicized, unfortunately. And we live in such divisive times. And to me, the fact that sharing about this movie, some people will immediately label me as some like QAnon right-wing Trump supporter is absolutely ridiculous. And yet I understand it shows the sign of our times, because obviously there's a lot of people who do support Trump, who are into Q, who, care about these child sex trafficking rings. And I will share, as someone who's just a free thinker and a self-researching being, who really wants to know truth. I did investigate Q a lot, and although there's troubling things about the whole Q phenomena, a lot of us probably never even still probably don't even know what it is, but there was a lot of information coming out about child and human sex trafficking. And as much as people have so much vitriol and hatred towards Donald Trump, we need to get beyond seeing people as monsters and seeing actually that some of these politicians do good and bad things. And there are things that Trump did during his presidency which are reprehensible, but there are things that he also did that are good. And this movie is a flashpoint for us to really understand that when these harrowing issues come out, like human and child sex trafficking, we need to find ways to bond beyond party lines, beyond the left and the right, and realize these are human issues. And I will also dare say, it makes you wonder, with the amount of resistance that the media has, who are very culpable in a repression of a lot of these stories, you wonder what is really going on there. If these powerful people who have a lot of power over the media industry, if they're not using some of their force to really suppress this film from going out. Because the beauty of this film is it's a grassroots movement. It's a movement. The only reason it's done as well as it has is because people have come together and supported the movie. Movie is not getting the amount of press and airplay that usually happens. And on the other side, it's getting a lot of antagonistic airplay. People are trying to tell people not to see this movie. Some of the hit pieces I've seen about this movie are absolutely ridiculous. And we have to really check in with how twisted our logic is becoming through all these stupid political tirades of division, to the point where we are literally deafening ourselves, benumbing ourselves to these really some of the most harrowing issues that are before us as a collective, such as human and child trafficking. We need to check in with ourselves if we're drawing judgments, reactionary judgments based on our political biases. This is not the time for that. We need to overcome them. We need to transcend them. So if you are feeling triggered by my video and by the film itself because you believe it's some like right-wing nutjob film, please sit with that. And I just really implore you, if you have the courage and the bravery to go beyond your prejudice, to go and just see the movie. Just go and see the movie. And then after that, come and supply your own commentary. But really, I feel this movie will touch everyone in a human way, everyone universally, so that we can really get on the same page that this is something that is harming some of the most innocent of our species, the children. And we need to come together for the children. If you've ever worked with indigenous wisdom keepers, they always exalt the children. They see the children as being so precious. They bring the children into all of their ceremonies. I was so touched when I started to work with First Nations people in Canada to witness this in Turtle Island. And we've lost this in our culture. We actually abuse our children so much through even the way that our media just like incessantly besieges the children with really negative messaging and pop culture that is really distorted and twisted. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that. Anyhow, I could share so much more, but I'm going to leave it there because it's getting on to being such a long video. But please go and see the movie Sound of Freedom, out now in theaters. Spread the word. Let your friends and family know about this film so that we can all start becoming more aware and creating more of a collective effort to end human and child trafficking. As the great credo of the film goes, God's children are not for sale.